What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning on in. I'm really excited for this one. I'm finally hitting on a decent launch monitor. I'm here at the Sweet Heat Golf and Long Drive in Spanish Fork, Utah. He's got the Bushnell Launch Pro setup, which is the same hardware, exact same unit as the GC3 from Foresight. I brought my Flightscope Mevo Plus with Pro package along with me, and as you can see from the title and the thumbnail of this one, we're going to put them head to head, look at all the data parameters between some irons and some drivers, see which one is more accurate and which one will be the right choice for you. All right, so I don't know if the camera can see if that focuses in. We've got a 9-iron in hand here. This is the Callaway Rogue ST Pro. I think that's what they call it. A bit of a mouthful of a name. So we've got the 9-iron. We've got the Foresight on the the Foresight from the Bushnell up and loaded. And then behind me, I've got my iPad with the Flightscope data, so we'll overlay that. I've got a camera pointing directly at the data points on the screen. Hopefully that's accurate enough to see. Yeah, I don't really know what to expect from irons. I rarely practice irons. Locally at sea level, my 9-iron should go about a 180 club. Here in Utah, that's probably with the altitude like a 190, 195 shot. Usually I move a 9-iron, I think mid 90s club speed, so 93 to 97 club speed. Well, that's a pretty perfect start. I mean, I flushed it, hit it really well, carried 190, little rollout, 199. Okay. So I'm going to wait for the data to come up on the Foresight screen. On Flightscope, we got 102.5 club speed, 128 ball. So Foresight read club speed a little less and ball speed a little more. So efficiency, like smash factor wise, it just read way higher on the Bushnell than it did on the Flightscope. Spin numbers, very far off. So we've got Bushnell at another 1,000 RPM of spin versus the Flightscope. And angle of attack, the Flightscope has me at negative 6.1 versus negative 5.1 on the Bushnell. Total distance, pretty close. Carry 189 versus 190, bang on, and 191 versus 199. So kind of funny to see actually that the Bushnell had that ball go further, because with an extra 1,000 RPM of spin, you should expect to see that since this is 7,700, but we got it to total of 200, you'd think that the total would be less on the Bushnell than it was on the Flightscope, because Flightscope actually read less spin, so you'd think more distance. Little pull and little thin. I think a lot of these are going to end up being pull to the right, because normally I play a pretty big draw with any iron, and it's hard to aim super far out left on this Bushnell, on any monitor for that matter. Okay, so club speed on Flightscope on that 9-iron, 102.8 versus 101. So again, Bushnell reading just a hair less. Ball speed, pretty well bang on. Smash factor, pretty close again. Angle of attack, another big difference here. So Bushnell has it at 5.8 down. Flightscope has it at 7.3 down. Club path close enough. And then total distance 202 versus 199. So, and pretty close in launch characteristics for launch angle there. So again, pretty similar shots. Total spin 8,200 versus 6,500 though. Now I should mention, I do have my club sticker on the 9-iron here for the Bushnell, as that's what you need for getting the club speed, AOA, path, that kind of data. I do not have the sticker on the golf ball for the Flightscope to read on indoor levels. All that being said, I last winter hit Flightscope indoor all winter. I hit it probably 4 days a week at least, and when I would go and hit on a different monitor like a TrackMan, my numbers were pretty well identical. So back in the day, when I first got this Flightscope, it was accurate, even without having the dot on the ball. Since then, if you've seen my last videos, we've had a lot of battles with Flightscope, but right now, on irons anyway, it's kind of proving me wrong. It's pretty accurate. Okay, that one launched it pretty high, higher than I normally would launch, so probably killed, never mind, didn't kill distance. We just moved a 9-iron 216 yards. According to Bushnell, was 216. On Flightscope, we've got 207.7 total with a 104.3 club speed. So again, we've seen a bit of a trend here. So Bushnell, over all the shots, has read a few miles an hour short of the Flightscope. However, ball speed measures bang on. Yeah, I know that the baseline or the more accurate unit should be the Bushnell Launch Pro, just because it's the exact same as the GC3, and there are a ton of videos out there of people putting the GC3 up against the TrackMan. And actually, for example, here, Andrew had a TrackMan and brought it in. Dylan and Andrew were hitting on it and made some bets and whatnot, and TrackMan and GC3, or this Bushnell Launch Pro, were like dead identical. So we're going to take that to assume the Bushnell is the most accurate unit, and anything outside of that is reading slightly off for different units. Spin, again, like 800 or so RPM off. Club path is pretty accurate. Total 216 versus 208. So that is the biggest variance so far we've seen in distance, about 8 yards. And I was right, I did launch that one quite a bit higher. So that's a 20-degree launch on Bushnell and 18.5 on Flightscope. So again, all the data is pretty close. Actually, angle of attack again, 6-7 down on the Bushnell, 8 down on the Flightscope. So it's kind of weird because you'd think the further down you hit on it, the higher the spin would be, kind of, roughly. So when I'm reading a more negative attack angle on Flightscope and less spin, something to me just doesn't add up. That doesn't make a ton of sense. So obviously a radar unit is calculating spin based off of an algorithm. It's not actually taking pictures like this unit of the spin as the golf ball leaves. Caught that one fat. So with the lack of spin, it might actually still carry to the, yeah, it did. So 105.2 club speed on Flightscope with a 129 ball speed. Now on the Bushnell, load it up, let's see. 101 club speed, so a big variance there. We lost 4 miles an hour of club speed on the Bushnell Launch Pro. But again, ball speed's pretty well bang on. We're only a mile off on ball speed. So Bushnell's just reading a way higher smash factor or efficiency than Flightscope is. Club path, I wouldn't complain about that. A few degrees off, it is what it is. Angle of attack, again, a degree different. And way less spin on the Flightscope. And a higher launch on Bushnell versus the Flightscope. So total 199 versus 202. So we tightened that gap a little bit from the last shot. So we're seeing a bit of a trend here. I'm seeing it now. I haven't done this test. Like, you guys are learning along with me here. So far, we're seeing the Bushnell reads lower club speed, higher ball speed. It's going to read higher spin and higher launch based on the 9-iron so far. We're just going to hit one more 9-iron, and then we're going to move into some drivers. Super high launch. That one kind of pop flied it, honestly. So that one's going to be like a 23-degree launch or something like that. Okay, so Flightscope, we're looking at 21-degree launch. So I was pretty close. I bet that's going to be 23 on Bushnell then. So 105.4 club speed and 131 ball speed on Flightscope. Came to 101 and 131. So again, ball speed identical, which is good to see. Club speed is just measuring a bit lower on the Bushnell, which I honestly, from all the research or what I always thought before doing this, I thought camera-based units read a little bit higher of club speed than radar-based units. So this is kind of proving me wrong. Club path, pretty much identical. Let's look at spin here. Spin, yeah, another 800 or so RPM off. Angle of attack, a degree off. Again, Flightscope's reading more down on it, but less spin, so a little bit weird. 21-degree launch, and yo, I called it perfectly. Right when I hit that ball, I said it's going to be 23 degrees of launch. Bingo. 23-degree launch angle right there. At least I know my shots. 202 total to a 210 total. So again, another 8 yards off, which is the biggest variance we've seen, but at over a 200-yard shot, does 8 yards matter that much? I'm going to hit probably a few drivers at like normal PGA Tour speed or like average golfer speed, just to give them both a fighting chance at what most people would be swinging at. And then we'll start moving the club a little bit faster, try and get like a 130, mid 130s club speed, and just see if they start to lose some accuracy at that higher speeds. Let's get into it. So really low launch angle and pretty low spin. It dove out of the air hard. So it was just felt like a little bunt shot. Yeah, okay, exactly what we wanted. 113 club speed, 162 ball speed on Flightscope. Club speed now, interesting. Am I going crazy? Was Bushnell before not reading a slower club speed? Now it's reading faster. So on driver, the club speed of Bushnell is reading faster, and on iron, it was reading slower. So that's interesting. Ball speed identical. So this is just reading a bit less of a smash factor on the Bushnell than it is on the Flightscope. Angle of attack, 1.5 degree up and 1.4 degree up. So attack angle, finally on this one, is pretty much bang even. Club path, 2.3 degrees right on Flightscope and 4.7 right on Bushnell. So that's a pretty big difference. Total yards, 309 to 286. That's a problem. That's a problem, Flightscope. So 2,600 spin on Flightscope versus 1,200 on Bushnell. I know it was closer to 1,200 because I caught it a little off the toe. And as you could have saw, like if you watched the ball on the screen, it just started diving out of the air. Which I know, again, you're trusting one monitor and not trusting the other. I have to assume that the Bushnell is the more accurate unit just because of it being identical to a GC3, which has been proven to be very close to a TrackMan. Let's load up another shot here. I think, so basically just because of that spin rate difference is why we lost. What difference is that? That's almost 20 yards, is it not? That's over 20 yards. 25-yard difference if my math has not failed me, which that's too big of a gap. Like you can't lose 25 yards on a driver at 115 club speed. Like we haven't even started moving this thing. I'm hitting chip shots and it's 25 yards off. Okay, that one was a little bit quicker. Again, didn't center it up. Let's see. Flightscope has 117.7 club speed for a 169 ball speed. See what Bushnell gives us here. The anticipation. 119 club speed. Okay, so again, we're reading a couple mile an hour faster on Bushnell versus Flightscope for club speed, and then ball speed pretty well bang on. So again, we're starting to see this trend. Spin this time was identical, or close, I shouldn't say identical, 100 RPM off. But if you're going to nitpick over 100 RPM, again, go buy a quad or a TrackMan. Launch angle 7 degrees versus 8.7. It was definitely at least 8.7. And then AOA 1.7 versus 1.2. So again, those are close enough. Total distance 329 versus 292 on Flightscope. So what's Flightscope doing? Because every other data parameter is bang on enough that the variance percentage wouldn't matter. Then you get to carry in total, and it's just out to lunch. 292 versus 3, so we're 30, that's almost 40 yards. 40 yards of difference on a driver when every other data parameter was identical. One or two more swings at like a modest club speed, like the sub 120 mark, and then we'll start moving it a little bit quicker. Caught that really low on the face, a little low heel. Not a good strike, not a good strike whatsoever. Let's check out what it says. So Flightscope 117 for a 168 ball speed. Bushnell 118, so closer, 1 mile an hour off, I'm not gonna complain about. 168 ball to 170, again, close enough. Launch at 9 versus launch at 7.3. So that's a bit of a problem. If you're, almost 2 degrees off on launch, that's gonna change quite a bit. 2480 spin to 2349, so close enough. And again, here's a massive difference because total distance, 330 yards on our Bushnell and 278 on the Flightscope. So they are both set to the exact same altitude, exact same temperature. We made this test as neutral as we could. Everything is basically optimized. There's no wind on either one. So this is just, a huge, huge difference in total yardage. That one was hit pretty well. Left the face open a hair. Okay, we started to move it a little bit quicker than I wanted, but this will be kind of the last one of slowish swings. 123.4 club speed for a 178 ball speed on Flightscope. And Bushnell 125 for 179. So again, ball speed's close. Bushnell's reading a couple mile an hour faster on club speed. Club path 4.6 right versus 6 degrees right on Bushnell. So Bushnell, I made sure to line up. I did the calibration on the Bushnell and made sure it was at 0 degrees. So it is reading 2 degrees more on average for every shot of a pull, if you will, for me. So right club path by an extra 2 degrees on Bushnell. Launch angle 8.3, Flightscope only 6.4, so a bit of a difference there. Angle of attack 1.6 to 1.9, close enough, and spin 200 RPM off. So again, nothing to really complain too much about in terms of the data until you get to the carry and total. Really spinny. I didn't hit very high up on that one. Pretty much neutral. Only 126 club speed. I thought I moved it a little bit quicker than that. 126.5 on Flightscope for a 181.5 ball speed. Bushnell, what's it giving us? 128 club speed. So pretty big jump there. Again, 183 ball speed. So reading a little bit faster on the Bushnell. Angle of attack 0.5 to 1.7. 10 degrees of launch versus 8. Club path, we're seeing the same sort of thing. Spin, here's a big difference. So this Bushnell caught that one, I think I was probably right around 3 to 32. So I guess it could have been 34. It definitely wasn't 26 like Flightscope said, which is really interesting because normally Flightscope will read high spin for me. Like way spinnier than it. Like I've had this thing tell me I'm hitting 5,000 plus RPM and I know I'm not. So it's weird to see that that's actually lower by a significant margin. Carry 320 for a total of 342 on Bushnell. And this one, we're getting a bit closer. 305 carry for a 319 total. So, I mean, well, we're still almost 30 yards off of total yardage. I hit a massive pull. Super far right club path, which I hate to see. Angle of attack 1.66 up on the Bushnell, it says, which is better. It actually picked it up. 1.7 on Flightscope, so that was pretty close. We've got a pretty big gap here in some numbers. So club speed 131 on Bushnell and only a 187 ball speed. So that's an efficiency, that's a smash factor of 1.43. Flightscope has us at 129.8, so a couple mile an hour less of club speed, And the ball speed had it at 193.6 versus the 187. So that's a big difference as well. We're 6 degrees out to in versus 2.9 degrees right or out to in on Flightscope. So I'm going to trust the Bushnell more on that one because I really felt myself pull that one inside. Carry 345 on Bushnell with a 9.6 launch. Interesting. 9.6 launch. Flightscope had that at a 16.6 launch, which wasn't the case. So that read something wrong there for sure. 345 carry to 347 carry. Let's go, Flightscope. Round of applause for Flightscope. We got one. There's one close. Total 375 versus 351 on Flightscope. So total yardage, it still missed out by 20 yards, which is crazy. Like, Flightscope read that as a faster ball speed with, what, 28 spin, 21 spin. Oh, that's why. Okay. So Flightscope just overread the spin, I guess. I already have a ball teed up. Flightscope overread the spin, which killed some of the distance. Go in the hole. Oh, it's not long enough. Uh, 130.6 for 189.3 on Flightscope, and 133 for 191 on Bushnell. Data-wise, I think the Bushnell's more accurate. It's just way more reliable. Seeing how far off a lot of those total and carry numbers were on the Flightscope would just make me rule it out immediately. If you're just looking to play golf and just have fun on a simulator and you don't care if your data is accurate or not, I think Flightscope's probably the cheap route, especially if you're in Canada, like I live. The Bushnell Launch Pro isn't available there. So you have to buy the GC3, which comes unlocked, which is, oh, great, but they're the same hardware. They offer the same software. One you can get in Canada, one you can't, but the one you can get in Canada, you can only buy unlocked. Like, you can't do the monthly subscription plan. So like for me, all I care about is seeing numbers hitting on a driving range. I don't want to play golf. I don't care. I know most people aren't like that. In that case, the GC3, the value is there if you're going to own it for 3 or more years. But it's also tough to spend $7,000 to $10,000 at one time on a monitor, where the Flightscope is, $2,500 to $4,000. But the data on the Bushnell is just undoubtedly way more accurate. Yeah, to summarize, on woods, it seemed like the Bushnell was reading a little bit quicker, club and ball speed, than the Flightscope. And on irons, it was the opposite. Flightscope, on average, was reading more down on every attack angle. So it was reading steeper, whether that was iron or woods. And spin was just all over the place on Flightscope. It couldn't really figure it out. Again, that could be because I'm not using the dots on these balls. But Flightscope has just done firmware update after firmware update, and it just gets more and more inaccurate, or more, I should say, like less reliable. One day I'll go out and Flightscope's perfectly accurate. Everything's happy-go-lucky, we're good. And then one day it's just like, everything's out to lunch. You can't trust any number. And it's weird that it literally has a mind of its own. And in past videos, I've been working with Rich from Flightscope there, sending data back and forth, trying to troubleshoot this unit, and they just have stopped getting back to me. So at this point, unfortunately, Flightscope I cannot recommend to anyone, A, because of the unreliability, the misreads on carry and total, and the customer service end of things. It's just not ideal when you're spending that kind of money to build a simulator. That's enough of me rambling. That's going to be it for this one. Hope you guys enjoyed this head-to-head comparison of the Flightscope Mevo Plus with Pro package and the Bushnell Launch Pro. If you guys are curious to see any other comparisons, moving to California, so hopefully I can get this Flightscope up against like some Trackmans or Quads or guys that I know down there that'll have that. So stay tuned. Please subscribe to the channel, like this video if you enjoy the content. Till next time, have a good one.